The steak knife trembled in my white-knuckled grip as I stared down at my husband's sleeping form. Tears blurred my vision. I had to end this tonight, before the change took me again. How had it come to this? I was Jill Thompson, the perfect housewife. I kept an immaculate home in our quiet Chicago suburb. I had dinner on the table for my husband Rick every night at 6 o'clock sharp, chocolate chip cookies always cooling on the rack. But I had a secret, a curse. Every full moon, the beast would claw its way out from deep within me, snarling and ravenous. My skin would split as dense fur pushed through. Bones shifted and reformed into monstrous proportions. The bloodlust would take hold, an all-consuming need to hunt, to feed, to kill. I'd wake the next morning naked and shivering, caked in blood and filth, our bedroom shredded to ribbons. Rick would be huddled in the corner, wild-eyed with terror. He never said a word, just cleaned up the destruction and pretended everything was fine. But I saw the fear in his eyes, the way he flinched when I reached for him. I couldn't live like this anymore, a slave to the monster inside me. Despair settled over me like a suffocating shroud. I raised the knife, poised it over my husband's heart. I'd make it quick, one sharp thrust to end his torment. Then I'd turn the blade on myself before the moon rose and the beast took control. My hand shook. Tears splashed onto Rick's face and his eyes fluttered open. He looked at me, at the knife, and understanding dawned in his sleep-fogged eyes. "Jill, no," he croaked, raising a hand as if to ward me off. A sob racked my body and I pressed the tip into his chest, a blossom of red spreading across his white t-shirt. The change was coming, I could feel it. The beast rattled the bars of its cage, hungry for blood. "I'm sorry," I wept. "I can't stop it. I never could." Searing pain lanced through my body as the transformation began. The knife tumbled from my grip. Bones cracked and reformed, claws erupted from my fingertips. Fur bristled down my spine. The last thing I saw before the red haze of bloodlust consumed me was my husband's face, contorted in abject horror. Then the beast took over and I was lost. I awoke in a field behind our house, naked and shivering in the gray dawn light. Sticky redness coated my hands, my face, matted my hair. Bits of flesh clung to my teeth. The taste of copper lay heavy on my tongue. But where is my husband? The night hung over Harrisburg like a moldering shroud, the moon's sickly glow barely penetrating the low clouds that seemed to trap the stench of decay in the city's narrow streets. I walked quickly, hands jammed in my pockets, trying to ignore the gnawing in my gut that could only be numbed by another pull of cheap whiskey. I was on my way to meet a source, some low-level staffer from the governor's office, who claimed to have dirt on the state's beloved first couple, Governor John Mitchell and his elegant wife Christine. Normally I wouldn't give a rat's ass about political gossip, but my editor had made it clear that if I didn't come back with a story, I shouldn't bother coming back at all. As I turned down a trash-strewn alley behind a boarded-up garment factory, a sound made me freeze mid-step. It was a low, guttural growl, so deep I could feel it in my molars. I held my breath, straining to listen over the thudding of my heart. From the shadows at the end of the alley, 2 points of amber light glowed in the darkness eyes, but no animal eyes I'd ever seen. The thing stepped forward, and the stench of rotten meat made my gorge rise. It was canine, but the size of a bear, with matted gray fur and a disturbingly human-like stance on its hind legs. Its muzzle wrinkled back in a snarl, revealing jagged, yellowed fangs glistening with saliva. "Jesus Christ," I choked out. The beast took another step forward, its claws gouging the asphalt. I scrabbled in my pockets for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers closed around the silver letter opener I'd swiped from the office, a gift from some politician that my editor actually considered worth keeping around. The creature lunged, a furry missile of teeth and claws. I lashed out wildly with the letter opener, feeling it connect and slice through flesh and sinew. An enraged roar shook the alley as the werewolf reared back, black blood seeping from the gash in its chest. Suddenly a shaft of moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the scene in lurid detail. And as I watched in horror, The beast began to change, its body warping and contracting. Fur receded, snout shortened, and an unmistakably feminine shape took form. In a matter of moments, the naked, blood-spattered figure of Christine Mitchell stood before me, her eyes still glowing with primal hunger. "You shouldn't have come here, mister." "Torrance," she growled. "My husband has worked too hard to see it all destroyed by an alcoholic hack like you." I gaped at her, my mind reeling, unable to reconcile the first lady I'd seen waving and smiling on TV with the murderous beast she'd become. Something inside me cracked and I began to laugh, a high, hysterical sound even to my own. I never believed the old tales. Werewolves, shapeshifters, creatures of the night, they were the stuff of myth and legend, not reality. At least that's what I thought, until it happened to my wife. It started with little things. Jenna would disappear for hours at night, coming home disheveled and exhausted, with no memory of where she'd been. She started eating her meat nearly raw, tearing into bloody steaks like a ravenous animal. Her temperament changed too, becoming aggressive and short-tempered, with a new cruel glint in her eyes. I tried to rationalize it away. The stress of her demanding job, sleepwalking perhaps, some new fad diet. But deep down I knew something was very wrong. Then came the full moon. That night, an ungodly howling echoed through the darkness, sending chills down my spine. Heart pounding, I crept downstairs, following the sound. There, in our living room, I found a scene out of a nightmare. A huge, snarling beast crouched before me, more wolf than human. Razor-sharp claws gouged the hardwood. Yellowed fangs dripped saliva. Intelligent, glowing eyes fixed on me, eyes I recognized. My wife's eyes. The creature that was Jenna lunged, a growl rumbling from its throat. I stumbled back with a shout of terror, barely escaping its snapping jaws. The thing crashed through the front door, disappearing into the night, leaving me alone in the ravaged house, trembling with shock and horror. My wife is a werewolf. I don't know how or why. What I do know is that I'm not safe. None of us are, because when the full moon rises, the beast within her awakens, and it hungers for human flesh. Desperate for answers, I delved into Jenna's past, uncovering a shocking secret. She wasn't bitten or cursed. She was born this way. Her family carried an ancient bloodline of werewolves, passing the curse from generation to generation. Jenna had fled her dark heritage, hoping to escape her fate. But the beast inside could not be denied. As I dug deeper, I made a chilling discovery. Jenna wasn't the only one. A hidden society of born werewolves lived among us, infiltrating every level of power and influence. And they had plans for humanity, dark, twisted plans that would reshape the world in their image. Now I'm faced with an impossible choice. Do I run, abandoning the woman I love to her monstrous nature? Or do I stay and fight, risking everything to save her and expose the werewolf conspiracy before it's too late? The future of humanity hangs in the balance, and the clock is ticking, because the next full moon is rising and the wolves are hungry. The full moon hung low and swollen in the night sky, casting a pallid glow over the crumbling ruins of the city. I huddled in the dank basement, clutching the silver knife in my trembling hands, listening to the skittering of rats in the walls. My name is Robert Lockwood, and my wife is a monster. Sarah and I used to have a normal life here in Millfield, or as normal as you can get in a rusting industrial town where the factories have long gone silent. She was a quiet woman, reserved, but with a sharp mind and a dry wit that I loved. We bought a little house, talked about starting a family, but then the changes began. It started with the night sweats and the nightmares that left her thrashing and snarling in her sleep. Then came the blackouts, the unexplained absences, the bloodstains on her clothes. I watched helplessly as my wife transformed into a creature I barely recognized. Now every full moon, Sarah's body twists and contorts into something from a nightmare. Coarse gray fur sprouts from her skin, her face elongates into a lupine muzzle, her hands curl into claws. She becomes a beast, 7 feet tall, with glowing red eyes and teeth like knives. A werewolf. I hear her stalking the streets above, hunting for human prey to sate her gnawing hunger. She is driven by pure bloodlust and animal savagery. The screams of her victims echo in the night, then cut off with a wet gurgle. I pray she doesn't find me down here. A scratch of claws on the basement door. A low growl that raises the hairs on my neck. My own wife has become my worst nightmare. I grip the silver knife, my last defense, and prepare for the confrontation I've been dreading. The door splinters and she's there, all teeth and claws and insatiable hunger. Her red eyes fix on me and she lunges. I slash desperately with the knife, but she's so fast, so monstrously strong. Hot blood sprays as her claws rip into my flesh. The pain is blinding. Yet I glimpse a flicker of tortured humanity in her crimson eyes. The real Sarah, trapped inside the beast, fighting for control. She hesitates just for a moment, and I plunge the silver blade into her heart. She falls back with an agonized howl that becomes a very human scream. I watch, weeping, as the wolf melts away and Sarah takes her last shuddering breaths in my arms. The monster is gone, but so is the woman I love. The full moon sets and dawn light seeps into the basement, illuminating the bloody scene. I think it's over, that I'm finally free. But then I feel an itch beneath my skin, a tightness in my joints, an ancient, ravenous hunger gnawing at my gut. And I realize the terrible truth the curse has passed to me. The cycle begins again. I stood at the altar, my white dress shimmering in the moonlight filtering through the pines. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But as I looked into Michael's eyes, ringed with a strange amber glow, a shiver of unease ran through me. The string quartet began playing the wedding march and I walked down the aisle, trying to ignore the prickling sensation running along my skin, like my flesh was crawling with ants. By the time I reached the altar to join hands with Michael, my head was pounding. My vision blurred at the edges. The officiant began the ceremony, her voice an indistinct murmur. Michael's grip on my hands tightened until it was almost painful. I looked up and gasped. Coarse black hair was sprouting along his jaw and down his neck. His mouth twisted into a lupine snarl, canine teeth elongating into vicious fangs. Shrieks rang out as the wedding guests leapt from their seats. But it wasn't Michael they were fleeing from, it was me. I doubled over as searing pain ripped through my abdomen. My fingernails thickened into curved black claws, shredding the delicate lace of my dress. The warm, coppery taste of blood flooded my mouth. Through the red haze descending over my vision, I saw Michael hunched on all fours, his tuxedo hanging in tatters around his bulky, fur-covered frame. He threw his head back and let out a bone-chilling howl that echoed through the night. The howl of a predator. The howl of a werewolf. I tried to scream, but all that came out was a guttural snarl. I lashed out with my claws, my body moving on pure instinct, and heard the satisfying rip of flesh and the crunch of bone. The metallic scent of blood drove me into a frenzy. I needed to hunt, to feed, to kill. Ill guests scattered in all directions, but there was no escape. Michael and I were too fast, too strong. We tore through the crowd until the ground was slick with blood and viscera. Anguished cries dwindled into gurgles and then silence. As the moon rose higher, we fled into the shadow-draped forest, leaving the gruesome scene behind. Branches whipped at my face and caught in my hair as we ran, the cool night air filling my lungs. My dress hung in blood-stained shreds, but it didn't matter anymore. Only the hunt mattered now. I had become the monster that would haunt my nightmares, the monster I couldn't outrun, because it was me. The hunger would never be sated. The savagery would never be tamed. I was a bride. I was a werewolf. I was cursed. And the real horror was knowing that, deep down, part of me relished it. I threw my head back and howled,